Although they managed to temporarily hold off Chehao and Zhang Xiaofan, there was a beautiful woman wielding a blue strange sword beside them. Although the smelly kid was injured, he was very peculiar. If the two of them attacked together, the situation would be very unfavorable. After fighting for 2 rounds, when Lu Zueki injured several demon cult members and turned back, the dog master shouted, "Run!" The tall man next to him and he acted simultaneously, withdrawing their magic weapons, merging with them, and then turned into 2 strange lights fleeing deeper into the cave. Other demon cult members, seeing this, screamed and scattered. Chehao made a quick decision and shouted, "Chase those 2. With that, he soared up on his sword and chased after them. Zhang Xiaofan followed closely behind. Lu Zueki's blue Chan Chao sword flashed, about to chase after them, but suddenly remembered something and was about to turn back. However, she suddenly saw Zhang Xiaofan soaring up with a flashing dark blue light stick, blood flowing from his shoulder, but the small red fork embedded in his shoulder had been pulled out. Zhang Xiaofan flew forward, and Lu Zueki looked at his figure, seemingly stunned for a moment before following him. This pursuit deep in the cave was somewhat reminiscent of Zhang Xiaofan's chase with Tianlinger after the monkey Zihui on the back mountain of Dezhou Peak, full of twists and turns, suddenly turning left, suddenly turning right, sometimes soaring into the sky, sometimes descending to the ground, and later on, it was a maze of paths. But the 4 members of Qingyun Sect didn't care about that, only watching the yellow and gray lights ahead, closely chasing after them. The cave was rugged, with bizarre peaks, and Zhang Xiaofan followed closely behind his fellow sect members, fully focused on controlling the flaming stick. In some places, it was so narrow that only one person could pass through, but Zhang Xiaofan didn't even have time to be afraid. With a shout, he managed to pass through. This pursuit, from front to back, turned into 6 lights in the darkness, moving at astonishing speeds. Zhang Xiaofan felt as if the fierce wind and darkness were entwined together, constantly rushing towards him. The chase lasted for nearly half an hour. The dog master and his companion were familiar with the terrain, weaving through twists and turns. Although they hadn't shaken off the relentless pursuers, they hadn't let them get closer either. Suddenly, a faint light appeared in the distance ahead. The dog master and the tall man immediately flew towards it at full speed, closely followed by Chehao and the others. Zhang Xiaofan followed behind them, feeling the pain in his shoulders gradually fading away. Even though he had endured the pain to pull out the small fork, he could still keep up unexpectedly, which surprised even himself. Although his shoulder hurt at the moment, his blood was circulating smoothly, as if he had endless strength. But when he thought of the scene just now, of the blood-sucking mentioned by the dog master, his heart grew cold, as if frozen to the bone. The light ahead grew closer and brighter, and the 6 of them rushed towards it like airs released from a bow. Got it? Here's the translation. The light, like a strange flower suddenly blooming in the darkness, illuminated the people before them. Zhang Xiaofan followed the crowd into the light. As his eyes adjusted, he was immediately astonished by the scene before him. It turned out that the place they had been chasing was a spacious and straight passage. Beyond this passage was an incredible vast space. The ceiling was hundreds of feet high, just a rock cave roof, while the ground was just 10 feet below. Not far ahead, on the ground, stood a huge stone emitting a strong light, illuminating the entire space. But the most surprising thing was not this giant stone, but behind it, deep in the light, there was a vast abyss suddenly revealed. The light emitted by the giant stone illuminated the dome of the cave, but it seemed unable to penetrate the abyss behind it. Looking from the air, it was pitch black, and even the other end of the abyss could not be seen, only a dead and gloomy darkness. In front of the giant stone, there were 3 people standing at the moment. One was a big man with a full beard, one was a rather beautiful young woman, and the other was a pale-faced youth dressed in white, with a sinister expression. Yi Gu Taoist and his tall companion landed and stood in front of the giant stone. Seeing the strange appearances of those people, Chehao dared not be careless. He signaled to his fellow disciples and landed 5 jung away from the giant stone. Zhang Xiaofan stood still and looked around, only to see that on the peculiar luminous giant stone, 3 big characters were engraved in ancient seal script. dead spirit abyss. Seeing the 4 disciples of Qingyun landing, the people standing under the giant stone remained silent, except for a big man with a full beard who frowned and said, "Yigu, Liu Hao, you guys are too incompetent. Encountering a few juniors from Qingyun, you ended up like this and even led them to the dead spirit abyss." Yigu Taoist blushed, about to explain, but a middle-aged woman behind the big man glanced at them and suddenly exclaimed, "Where's third brother Zhang?" Yigu glanced at the Qingyun disciples and said, "He died at their hands." What? Originally stable as Mount Tai, these people were all moved, but it seemed not because of the profound cultivation of Qingyun's disciples, but for the fact that Zhang third brother was killed. Seeing the hesitation, the middle-aged woman shook her head and said, "If the blood-sucking old monster investigates this, we won't be able to explain ourselves." The big man with the full beard pondered for a moment, then turned to look at the disciples of Qingyun and said, "Then we'll take down these few Qingyun juniors and hand them over to senior bloodsucker later. That'll be it." The others nodded in agreement, seeing their arrogance. Che Hao became more cautious. He whispered to the 3 people behind him, "These people seem to be the masterminds of the demonic sect here. They might have even higher cultivation bases than those we encountered earlier. Everyone, be careful in dealing with them." Zhang Xiaofan acknowledged with a sound. When he turned his head, he suddenly saw Lu Zueki's gaze sweep over the wound on his shoulder. He was slightly stunned, and Lu Zueki immediately shifted her gaze away. At this moment, the big man took a step forward and said to the disciples of Qingyun, "I advise you all to surrender, so you won't have to suffer bone-breaking pain when we make our move later." Che Hao snorted before he could speak. He heard Lu Zueki behind him coldly saying, "Evil clowns, still daring to be arrogant. Today, the day you die." Che Hao and Zhang Xiaofan simultaneously clapped their hands and said, "What senior sisterly said is right.